Most people think rent goes up because landlords are greedy. Some blame inflation, others blame politicians. But the truth is simpler and far more unsettling. Somewhere, in a quiet room you've never seen, a decision is made. Yet that decision quietly determines whether your rent rises or becomes impossible to afford. This isn't a conspiracy. It's not a secret meeting. It's a systemic decision, one that affects mortgages, construction loans, property investors, and ultimately you. Here's the strange part. The people who make this decision were never elected. You didn't vote for them. You can't vote them out. And yet, their choices ripple through the economy faster than any law passed in Parliament. When interest rates rise, landlords pay more to borrow, banks tighten lending, developers stop building, housing supply shrinks, and rent rises. Most people feel the effect, but almost no one understands the source. So who are these people? Why do they have this power? And how did we accept a system where one announcement can quietly raise the cost of living for millions without a single vote? To understand this, we need to step away from politics and look at how power actually works in modern systems. Because in today's world, the most powerful decisions are rarely made by presidents or prime ministers. They're made by institutions designed to be independent and intentionally distant from public pressure. This is the story of central banks and why they control your rent more than your local government ever could. But to understand why they exist, we need to go back to a time when letting politicians control money nearly destroyed entire nations. For most of history, governments controlled money directly. Kings minted coins, presidents printed bills, politicians decided how much money entered the economy, and almost every time, ended badly. When governments face pressure wars, elections, economic pain, the temptation is always the same. Print more money. Spend now, worry later. In the short term, it feels good. In the long term, it destroys trust in the currency. History is full of examples. Germany in the 1920s, Latin America in the 1980s. More recently, countries where money lost value faster than people could earn it. So economists came up with a dangerous sounding but stabilizing idea: remove control of money from politicians. The logic was simple. Politicians think in election cycles. Economies need long-term stability, so central banks were designed to be boring, slow, cautious, and insulated from public pressure. No elections, no popularity contests, no promises to voters. Their job wasn't to make people happy. It was to keep inflation under control, protect the currency, and prevent economic collapse. This is why central bankers aren't elected. Their legitimacy doesn't come from votes. It comes from credibility. Markets trust them because they're not supposed to panic, not supposed to chase approval, not supposed to respond emotionally. But here's where the system gets uncomfortable. By making central banks independent, we gave them extraordinary power. Without democratic accountability, they don't just influence inflation, they influence mortgage rates, rent prices, job availability, business expansion, government borrowing costs. One decision can slow an entire economy. And once you understand that, the question isn't why they have power. The real question becomes, who do central banks actually respond to if not voters? Central banks don't listen to voters. They don't answer to landlords. And they don't adjust interest rates because people are struggling. So what do they respond to? Markets. Specifically, inflation expectations, bond markets, investor confidence, currency stability. If inflation appears out of control, investors lose trust. When trust disappears, money leaves. Currencies weaken. Imports get expensive. That's when economies spiral. So central banks raise interest rates not to punish people, but to signal discipline. Higher rates tell markets, we're serious. We won't let this get worse. But discipline has a cost. When rates rise, borrowing slows, construction stalls, small businesses struggle, unemployment risk increases, and housing becomes more expensive. Central banks know this. They accept it. Because in their framework, short-term pain is preferable to long-term collapse. This is why public anger rarely changes rate decisions. Central banks aren't designed to be compassionate. They're designed to be credible. That's also why governments often look powerless during economic crises. If politicians pressure central banks too much, markets react negatively, currencies drop, borrowing costs spike. So governments comply even when it's politically painful. This is the uncomfortable reality of modern power. Democratic governments operate inside systems they don't fully control. And rent increases aren't a failure of housing policy alone. They're a side effect of monetary systems prioritizing stability over affordability. But this still leaves one question unanswered. If central banks are so powerful, why do we tolerate a system that affects daily life yet feels completely unreachable? The system exists because the alternative is worse. When money loses credibility, everything collapses. Savings vanish. Salaries become meaningless. Social order breaks down. Independent central banks are a response to that danger. But every system has trade-offs. By removing monetary power from politics, we reduced reckless spending, but we also created a distance between decision makers and daily hardship. Central bankers don't see eviction notices. They don't feel rent anxiety. They don't face voters at town halls. Their world is data, models, and forecasts. And when numbers say inflation is dangerous, rates rise even if millions are already struggling. This creates a silent tension. Economic stability vs. social pressure. And that tension shows up most clearly in housing. Housing isn't just shelter, it's an asset, a loan, and a market. Interest rates flow through every layer of it. So when rates rise, developers pause projects, landlords pass costs on renters, absorb the shock. No law is passed. No headline screams, rent hike approved. It just happens. This is what systemal control looks like. Not force, not conspiracy, just incentives flowing through structures. And once you see it, you realize something unsettling. In modern societies, power doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to adjust the system. Central banks aren't villains, and they're not heroes. They're mechanisms. They exist because trust in money is fragile, and once it breaks, rebuilding it can take generations. So this system will remain. Interest rates will continue shaping lives without votes, and unelected institutions will keep making decisions that feel deeply personal. The real danger isn't their power, it's our misunderstanding of it. Because when people don't understand systems, they blame faces, they blame leaders, they argue over elections, while the structure stays untouched. Understanding this doesn't make rent cheaper tomorrow, but it does something more important. It reveals where power actually lives. And once you see that, you start noticing it everywhere: in debt, in bailouts, in laws shaped without elections. That's what this channel explores. Because in the modern world, the most important decisions are rarely made on ballots. They're made inside systems, and those systems quietly control outcomes.